while she in coma, her alpha mate planned her burial. Until the healer whispered, "She has awakened." The autumn wind swept through the narrow streets of Boston, carrying with it the scent of rain and dying leaves. Inside Massachusetts General Hospital, the fluorescent lights hummed their monotonous tune, casting pale shadows across the intensive care unit. Room 347 held a silence so profound it seemed to swallow sound itself. On the bed lay Emma Richardson, 28 years old, her chest rising and falling with mechanical precision, courtesy of the ventilator that had become her lifeline 3 weeks ago. Her fiancé, Marcus Webb, sat in the corner chair, his 6-foot frame folded into an uncomfortable position he'd maintained for hours. His dark hair was disheveled, his usually sharp blue eyes now bloodshot and hollow. The accident had happened so suddenly, a drunk driver running a red light on Commonwealth Avenue, Emma's sedan crumpling like paper. The doctors had used words like traumatic brain injury, minimal brain activity, and the one that haunted him most, unlikely to recover. If you're watching this, please take a moment to subscribe and leave a comment telling us where you're from. Now let's continue with Emma's story. Marcus had been the strong one, the decision maker, the alpha in their relationship and in his role as senior partner at Webb & Associates, one of Boston's most prestigious law firms. Everyone looked to him for answers, for direction. But now, faced with the impossible choice the doctors were presenting, he felt anything but strong. Dr. Patricia Chen, the attending neurologist, had pulled him aside that morning with gentle but firm words. "Mr. Webb, it's been 3 weeks. The scans show no improvement. Her brain activity is minimal. We need to discuss next steps." Next steps. Such clinical language for what they were really asking. Permission to let Emma die. Marcus stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the linoleum floor. He walked to Emma's bedside, taking her cold hand in his. Her engagement ring caught the light, a simple platinum band with a single diamond, chosen because Emma had always preferred elegance over extravagance. They were supposed to be married in the spring, at the Boston Public Garden where he'd proposed 2 years ago under the cherry blossoms. "I can't do this," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I can't let you go." But the reality was crushing him. His mother had flown in from Chicago, his sister from Seattle. Emma's parents, devastated and broken, had been camping in the hospital waiting room. Yesterday, his mother had taken him aside, her voice gentle but insistent. "Marcus, sweetheart, you need to think about what Emma would want. Would she want to exist like this, trapped?" He'd wanted to scream at her, to tell her she didn't understand. But the terrible truth was that she might be right. Emma had always been so full of life, so vibrant. She ran marathons, volunteered at the animal shelter, filled their apartment with laughter and music. This shell in the hospital bed wasn't Emma. It was just her body, holding on by threads and machines. The days had blurred together since the accident. Marcus remembered the phone call that had shattered his world. He'd been in a meeting with a client when his phone rang. He normally would have ignored it, but something made him look at the screen. Unknown number. He'd excused himself and answered, and a police officer's calm, professional voice had delivered the news that would change everything. "Mr. Webb, there's been an accident involving Emma Richardson. You're listed as her emergency contact. You need to come to Massachusetts General immediately." The drive to the hospital had been a nightmare of traffic and terror. Marcus had abandoned his car in a loading zone and run through the emergency room doors, demanding to see Emma. The nurses had tried to prepare him, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight of her. Tubes and wires everywhere, her face swollen and bruised, a ventilator breathing for her because she couldn't breathe on her own. The drunk driver had walked away with minor injuries. Marcus had wanted to kill him, had actually started toward the man's room before hospital security gently but firmly redirected him. The driver was a 23-year-old kid named Tyler Morrison, and he'd blown twice the legal limit. He'd been crying, apologizing, saying he didn't remember getting behind the wheel. Marcus didn't care about his remorse. All he cared about was Emma. And Emma was dying. The first week had been a roller coaster of hope and despair. The doctors had performed emergency surgery to relieve pressure on Emma's brain, and for a few days, they'd been cautiously optimistic. But then the swelling had increased again, and the optimism had faded. By week 2, the doctors were using phrases like persistent vegetative state and quality of life considerations. By week 3, they were openly discussing withdrawal of care. Marcus had researched everything he could find about traumatic brain injuries, comas, recovery rates. The statistics were grim. The longer someone remained in a coma, the less likely they were to recover. And if they did recover, the chances of significant disability were high. He'd read stories of miracle recoveries, but he'd also read stories of families who'd kept loved ones on life support for years, hoping for a miracle that never came. Emma's parents, Robert and Linda Richardson, were destroyed. Linda had aged 10 years in 3 weeks, her face gaunt and pale, her eyes perpetually red from crying. Robert had retreated into a stoic silence that was somehow worse than tears. They'd raised Emma as an only child after Linda's difficult pregnancy had made further children impossible, and they'd poured all their love and hopes into their daughter. Watching her lie motionless in that hospital bed was killing them slowly. "What do you think we should do?" Robert had asked Marcus one evening, his voice hoarse. They were in the hospital cafeteria, picking at food neither of them wanted. "You know Emma better than anyone. What would she want?" Marcus had stared at his coffee, unable to meet the older man's eyes. "She always said she didn't want to be kept alive by machines. We had that conversation once, after her grandmother died. She said if she was ever in a situation where she couldn't really live, couldn't be herself, she'd want to be let go." Robert had nodded slowly, tears sliding down his weathered cheeks. "Linda and I have been thinking the same thing. But thinking it and doing it, those are 2 different things." "I know," Marcus had whispered. "God, I know." That conversation had been the turning point. Marcus had realized that continuing to keep Emma on life support wasn't about what was best for her. It was about what was easiest for him. He was keeping her alive because he couldn't bear to let her go, couldn't face a world without her in it. But was that fair to Emma? Was he being selfish, prolonging her suffering because he couldn't accept the truth? That afternoon, Marcus made the call he'd been dreading. He contacted Riverside Cemetery in Watertown, the same place where Emma's grandmother was buried. The funeral director, a soft-spoken man named Mr. Harrison, had been understanding and patient, walking Marcus through options he never imagined he'd have to consider at 29 years old. "I'm very sorry for your loss," Mr. Harrison had said, his voice professionally sympathetic. "She's not gone yet," Marcus had replied, his throat tight. "But the doctors say it's time. I understand. This is never easy, Mr. Webb. Take your time. We'll help you through every step." They'd discussed caskets, oak or mahogany, simple or ornate, burial plots near the old oak tree where Emma's grandmother rested, or in the newer section with the view of the pond. Service arrangements, religious or secular, large or intimate. Each decision felt like a betrayal, like he was giving up on her. But he forced himself to make them. White roses for the casket spray, because Emma had always loved white roses. A simple oak casket, because Emma had never been one for ostentation. A plot near her grandmother, because Emma had adored the old woman and had been devastated when she'd passed. "We can schedule the service for next week," Mr. Harrison had said. "That gives you time to make arrangements with the hospital and gather family." Marcus had agreed, his voice mechanical, his mind numb. He'd signed papers, made deposits, chosen flowers. He'd done it all in a fog, feeling like he was watching himself from outside his body, wondering how his life had become this nightmare. When he'd returned to the hospital that evening, he'd found Emma's room more crowded than usual. Dr. Chen was there, along with 2 other physicians he didn't recognize, and a woman in her 60s wearing not a white coat, but a cardigan and jeans. She had kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a loose bun. "Mr. Webb," Dr. Chen said, "this is Dr. Margaret Sullivan. She's a neurologist who specializes in coma patients and consciousness disorders. I asked her to consult on Emma's case." Marcus felt a flicker of something. Hope. Annoyance that they were bringing in more opinions now, after he'd already made his terrible decision. He shook Dr. Sullivan's hand, noting her firm grip and steady gaze. "I've reviewed Emma's charts and scans," Dr. Sullivan said without preamble. "Dr. Chen mentioned you're considering withdrawal of care." Marcus flinched at the phrase but nodded. "The doctor said there's no hope, that she's essentially gone." Dr. Sullivan moved to Emma's bedside, pulling out a small penlight. "The brain is the most complex organ we have, Mr. Webb. We're still learning about consciousness, about what these scans really tell us." She began a series of tests, shining the light in Emma's eyes, applying pressure to her nail beds, speaking her name in different tones. Marcus watched, wanting to tell her it was pointless, that dozens of doctors had done the same tests with the same results. But something in Dr. Sullivan's manner, the careful attention, the way she seemed to be listening for something beyond the obvious, kept him silent. Dr. Sullivan spent nearly 20 minutes examining Emma, far longer than any other doctor had taken. She tested reflexes, observed breathing patterns, watched Emma's eyes for any sign of tracking. She spoke to Emma in different volumes and tones, watching for any response. She even played different sounds on her phone, a dog barking, a baby crying, music, noting Emma's vital signs on the monitors. "Tell me about Emma," Dr. Sullivan said suddenly, turning to Marcus. "What does she do? What does she love?" Marcus was taken aback by the question. "She's a social worker. She works with at-risk youth in Dorchester. She's passionate about it, about giving kids a chance when everyone else has given up on them." His voice broke slightly. "She runs marathons. She volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. She plays guitar, not well, but she loves it. She makes these elaborate Sunday breakfasts. Pancakes, bacon, fresh fruit, the whole thing. She's the kindest person I've ever known." Dr. Sullivan nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And you two were planning to get married?" "In the spring, April 23rd. We were going to have the ceremony at the public garden where I proposed." "What was she wearing when you proposed?" Marcus blinked, confused by the question. "A blue dress, light blue with little white flowers on it. Why does that matter?" "It matters because Emma is a person, not just a patient," Dr. Sullivan said firmly. "She has a life, a history, people who love her, and I think we need to be absolutely certain we understand her condition before we make irreversible decisions." She turned back to Dr. Chen. "I'd like to order a PET scan, positron emission tomography. It can show us brain activity that doesn't appear on standard CT or MRI scans. Sometimes patients in what appears to be a vegetative state actually have significant consciousness that we can't detect through normal means." "We've done EEGs," Dr. Chen said, her tone slightly defensive. "They showed minimal activity." "EEGs measure electrical activity at the surface," Dr. Sullivan countered. "PET scans can show us metabolic activity in deeper brain structures. I've seen cases where patients appeared completely unresponsive, but were actually aware, trapped in their own bodies. It's called locked-in syndrome, or sometimes a minimally conscious state that mimics a vegetative state." Marcus felt his heart hammering. "Are you saying Emma might be aware? That she's been lying here, conscious, while we've been planning to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm saying we don't know enough yet," Dr. Sullivan said carefully. "But I think we owe it to Emma to find out before making irreversible decisions. The tests we've done so far are standard, but they're not comprehensive. A PET scan will give us a much clearer picture of what's happening in her brain. Marcus looked at Emma's still face, remembering the way her eyes would light up when she laughed, the way she'd scrunch her nose when concentrating on a difficult case at work. "Do it," he said. "Do the scan." Dr. Chen looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Webb, I want to manage your expectations. Even if the PET scan shows more activity than we've seen on other tests, that doesn't necessarily mean Emma will wake up. It doesn't guarantee recovery." "I understand," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure he did. All he knew was that Dr. Sullivan had given him something he'd thought was lost: hope. Maybe it was false hope. Maybe he was just prolonging the inevitable. But he had to know. He had to be absolutely certain before he let Emma go. The PET scan was scheduled for the following morning. Marcus spent the night in Emma's room, unable to sleep, alternating between hope and the fear that he was just prolonging the inevitable. He held her hand and talked to her, telling her about Dr. Sullivan, about the test they were going to do. "If you're in there, Em, if you can hear me, I need you to fight," he whispered. "I need you to show them you're still here. I can't lose you. I'm not ready to say goodbye." Around 3 a.m, Marcus called Mr. Harrison at the funeral home, leaving a voicemail asking to postpone the arrangements. His voice was shaking as he spoke. "I'm sorry for the short notice. We're doing another test. I need to know for sure before we move forward." When morning came, Marcus was exhausted but wired with nervous energy. Emma's parents arrived early, and Marcus explained about Dr. Sullivan and the PET scan. Linda's face lit up with desperate hope, while Robert remained cautiously skeptical. "We've had so many ups and downs," Robert said quietly. "I don't know if I can take another disappointment." "I know," Marcus said, "but we have to try. We have to know." The scan took 2 hours. Emma was wheeled away on her gurney, still connected to her ventilator and monitors, and Marcus was left to pace the waiting room. He drank terrible coffee and fielded calls from family members wanting updates. His mother urged caution. "Don't get your hopes up, sweetheart. Sometimes it's kinder to let go." His sister was more optimistic. "If there's any chance at all, you have to take it." Marcus's best friend, David, showed up around noon with sandwiches that Marcus couldn't eat. David had been his roommate in college, had been the best man at the wedding that was supposed to happen. He'd been a constant presence since the accident, handling things Marcus couldn't deal with, running interference with well-meaning friends who didn't understand that Marcus couldn't talk about it, couldn't process their sympathy. "How are you holding up?" David asked, though the answer was obvious from Marcus's haggard appearance. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I thought I'd made peace with it. I thought I'd accepted that she was gone. And now this doctor comes in and says maybe she's not. Maybe she's trapped in there, aware but unable to communicate." "If that's true, David, if she's been conscious this whole time while we've been planning her funeral." "Don't go there," David said firmly. "You did the best you could with the information you had. That's all anyone can do." When Dr. Sullivan finally emerged, her expression was carefully neutral. Marcus's stomach dropped. In his experience, neutral expressions from doctors rarely preceded good news. He followed her to a small consultation room where Dr. Chen was already waiting, along with another specialist whose name Marcus immediately forgot. Emma's parents joined them, Linda gripping Robert's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. Dr. Sullivan pulled up images on a computer screen, colorful scans of Emma's brain, areas lighting up in yellows, reds, and blues. To Marcus, they looked like abstract art, beautiful but incomprehensible. "These are Emma's PET scan results," Dr. Sullivan said, her voice measured and professional. "What we're looking at here is metabolic activity in different regions of the brain. The colors indicate how active each area is. Red and yellow mean high activity, blue and green mean lower activity." She pointed to a region near the center of the brain. "This area here is the thalamus. It's essentially the brain's relay station, crucial for consciousness and awareness. In a truly vegetative state, we'd expect to see very little activity here. But Emma's thalamus is showing significant metabolic activity. Marcus leaned forward, his heart pounding. What does that mean? It means her brain is processing information, Dr. Sullivan said. And this area, she indicated another lit-up region, is part of the default mode network. This network is active when we're self-aware, when we're thinking about ourselves and others, when we're conscious of our own existence. Again, in a vegetative state, we wouldn't expect to see this kind of activity. Linda let out a small sob, and Robert wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Dr. Chen was studying the scans with a frown. I have to admit, this is more activity than I expected based on her clinical presentation and the EEG results. EEGs have limitations, Dr. Sullivan said. They're excellent tools, but they can miss activity in deeper brain structures. What these PET scans are telling us is that Emma's brain is showing activity consistent with consciousness. She's not in a vegetative state. Based on these results, she may be in what we call a minimally conscious state, possibly even more aware than that. But she doesn't respond, Dr. Chen said. She doesn't follow commands, doesn't track with her eyes, shows no purposeful movement. Which brings me to the second thing I found, Dr. Sullivan said. She pulled up a different set of images, these showing the structure of Emma's brain rather than its activity. Look here, at the motor cortex. Do you see this area of swelling? She pointed to a region that even Marcus could see looked abnormal, a dark area pressing against the brain tissue. This is significant edema, swelling, pressing directly on the motor cortex. The motor cortex controls voluntary movement. If there's pressure on this area, it could explain why Emma isn't responding physically, even if she's conscious. Marcus felt like the room was spinning. You're saying she might be aware, but she can't move? She can't show us she's aware because of the swelling. That's exactly what I'm saying, Dr. Sullivan confirmed. It's possible, and I want to stress that this is not certain, but possible, that Emma has been conscious to some degree, but unable to communicate that consciousness because of the physical damage and swelling. Linda was crying openly now, and Marcus felt tears burning his own eyes. So there's a chance? A real chance she could wake up. There's a chance, Dr. Sullivan said carefully. I won't lie to you. It's not guaranteed, and recovery could be long and difficult. The swelling needs to come down, and we don't know what other damage might have occurred. But yes, based on these scans, I believe there's a real chance. And I think we should try aggressive treatment before we consider withdrawal of care. What kind of treatment? Robert asked, his voice rough with emotion. High-dose steroids to reduce the swelling, combined with intensive stimulation therapy, Dr. Sullivan explained. We talk to her constantly, play music she loves, bring in familiar scents and textures. We give her brain every possible stimulus, every reason to fight its way back. We also monitor her closely for any signs of emerging consciousness, eye movements, attempts to vocalize, any kind of purposeful response. How long? Marcus asked. How long do we try before we know if it's working? I'd like to see what happens over the next 2 weeks, Dr. Sullivan said. If we're going to see improvement from reducing the swelling, we should see signs within that time frame. But I want to be clear, even if we see improvement, recovery from this kind of injury is measured in months or years, not days or weeks. Marcus looked at Emma's parents. Linda was nodding eagerly, hope blazing in her eyes. Robert looked torn between hope and fear of more disappointment. Do it, Marcus said. Whatever it takes, do it. Dr. Chen still looked skeptical, but she nodded. I'll order the steroids and adjust her treatment plan. Dr. Sullivan, I'd like you to stay on as a consultant if you're willing. I'm willing, Dr. Sullivan said. I've seen too many cases where we gave up too soon. I'm not saying Emma will definitely recover, but I think she deserves every chance. The next few days were a blur of activity. Marcus brought in Emma's favorite playlist, a mix of indie folk and classic rock, with artists like the Lumineers, Fleetwood Mac, and Hozier. He set up a small speaker in her room and played the music constantly, hoping that somewhere in the darkness where Emma was trapped, she could hear it and know he was there. Emma's best friend, Sarah, came daily to read aloud from the mystery novels Emma loved. She'd bring the latest Tana French or Ruth Ware book and sit by Emma's bedside for hours, reading in her clear, expressive voice. "I know you can hear me, Em," Sarah would say. "And I know you're dying to find out who the killer is, so you better wake up so we can discuss it." Linda brought in lavender sachets because Emma had always kept them in her dresser drawers, loving the calming scent. She'd tuck them around Emma's pillow and stroke her daughter's hair, singing the lullabies she'd sung when Emma was a baby. Robert would sit silently, holding Emma's hand, his presence a steady anchor. Marcus talked to her constantly, telling her about his day, reminding her of their plans, begging her to come back to him. He told her about cases at work, about the weather, about the cat they'd adopted together, an orange tabby named Pumpkin, who was being cared for by David, but who Marcus knew was missing Emma terribly. "Pumpkin keeps sleeping on your side of the bed," Marcus told her one evening. "He knows you're supposed to be there. We all know you're supposed to be there. Please, Em, please come back to us." The steroids began to work. The swelling decreased, visible on the follow-up scans Dr. Sullivan ordered. But Emma remained unresponsive, and Marcus felt his hope beginning to fray again. Dr. Sullivan remained optimistic, pointing out that the brain needed time to heal, that they couldn't expect immediate results. But even she admitted that the lack of physical response was concerning. "Sometimes the brain needs time to rewire itself," she explained. "The pathways that controlled movement might need to find new routes around the damaged areas. It's not like flipping a switch. It's more like rebuilding a road system after an earthquake." Marcus clung to her words, but doubt was creeping in. What if he was wrong? What if he was putting Emma's parents through unnecessary suffering, prolonging the inevitable? The funeral arrangements were still on hold, but Mr. Harrison had called twice, gently asking about timing. Marcus had put him off, but he knew he couldn't postpone indefinitely. It was day 8 of the new protocol when it happened. Marcus was alone with Emma, late at night. The hospital was quiet, the hallway lights dimmed. He was holding her hand and telling her about a case at work, a custody battle that had reminded him why he'd gone into family law in the first place, to help people during their worst moments. "There's this little girl 7 years old and both parents want custody," he said softly, "but neither of them is really thinking about what's best for her. They're so focused on winning, on beating each other, that they've forgotten she's a person with feelings and needs. It made me think of you, of the work you do with kids. You always said that children aren't pawns, they're people. You'd know exactly what to say to these parents to make them see that." He paused, swallowing hard. "I wish you could tell me what you think. You always had better instincts about people than I did. You'd know the right thing to do." And then he felt it, the slightest pressure against his palm, so faint he thought he'd imagined it. Marcus froze, his breath catching. "Emma?" His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it. "Emma, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand again." Nothing. He waited, barely breathing, counting the seconds. 10, 20, 30. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe it was just a muscle spasm, a random nerve firing. The doctors had warned him about that, about seeing signs that weren't really there because he wanted so desperately to see them. Then, after what felt like an eternity, another small squeeze. Definite, unmistakable, purposeful. Marcus lunged for the call button, pressing it frantically. "I need a doctor. Now!" She squeezed my hand. Emma squeezed my hand. The night nurse, a competent woman named Jennifer who'd been kind to Marcus over the past weeks, rushed in. "Mr. Webb, what happened?" "She squeezed my hand. Twice. Emma, do it again, squeeze my hand. He was gripping her hand, willing her to respond, and she did. A weak squeeze, but there, real, undeniable. Jennifer's eyes widened. I'll get the doctor. She hurried out, and Marcus heard her paging the resident on duty, her voice urgent. Marcus was crying now, tears streaming down his face. That's it, Em. That's it. I knew you were in there. I knew it. Keep fighting. Please keep fighting. The resident arrived, a young doctor named Patel, who looked exhausted, but became alert when Jennifer explained what had happened. He performed tests, asking Emma to squeeze hands, to move her toes. The responses were inconsistent and weak, but they were there. Real. Proof of consciousness, of will, of Emma fighting her way back. Dr. Patel called Dr. Chen, who arrived despite the late hour, her hair hastily pulled back. She conducted her own examination, her expression shifting from skepticism to cautious excitement. This is significant, she said. These are purposeful responses. Emma, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me. A pause, then a squeeze. Can you squeeze your right hand? Dr. Chen asked. Emma's right hand squeezed. Now your left? The left hand squeezed, weaker but present. Doctor? Chen looked at Marcus, and for the first time since the accident, he saw real hope in her eyes. Mr. Webb, I think Dr. Sullivan was right. I think Emma is emerging. Dr. Sullivan was called in despite the late hour. She arrived within 30 minutes, her hair still damp from a shower, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt. She conducted her own examination, taking her time, speaking gently to Emma, praising each response. When she finished, she was smiling, a real, genuine smile that transformed her face. She's emerging, Dr. Sullivan said. This is exactly what we hoped for. The swelling has decreased enough that she's regaining motor control. It'll be gradual, but this is a very good sign. A very good sign indeed. Marcus called Emma's parents, waking them with the news. They arrived within the hour. Linda still in her nightgown under her coat, both of them crying as they took turns holding Emma's hand and feeling her squeeze back. My baby, Linda sobbed. My baby girl, you're coming back to us. Over the next 48 hours, Emma's responses became stronger and more consistent. She began to track movement with her eyes, following people as they moved around the room. She squeezed hands on command. She even managed to move her toes when asked, a feat that had the physical therapist nearly dancing with excitement. On the third day after that first squeeze, Marcus leaned close and whispered, I love you, Em. I love you so much. And Emma's lips moved, forming the words without sound. Love you. Marcus broke down completely, sobbing with relief and joy and the release of 3 weeks of unbearable tension. The nurses gave him privacy, understanding that some moments are too sacred for witnesses. He laid his head on Emma's bed, holding her hand to his cheek, feeling her fingers weakly stroke his hair. Dr. Chen made the decision to begin weaning Emma off the ventilator. It was a slow process, testing her ability to breathe on her own for increasing periods of time. Emma's lungs proved stronger than expected, and after 2 days of trials, the breathing tube was removed. Emma's voice was raspy and weak, her throat raw from weeks of intubation, but it was the most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard. Marcus, she whispered, her eyes focusing on his face with obvious effort. I'm here, he said, holding her hand to his cheek, tears streaming down his face. I'm right here. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. What happened? Each word was an effort, her voice barely audible. He told her gently about the accident, the coma, the weeks of uncertainty. He told her about Dr. Sullivan, about the PET scan, about the decision he'd almost made. Emma listened, tears sliding down her temples into her hair. I heard you, she said when he finished, her voice getting slightly stronger. Not everything, but pieces, your voice, music, Sarah reading. I was trying so hard to move, to show you I was here, but I couldn't. It was like being buried alive. Marcus felt sick thinking about it, about how close he'd come to giving up on her. I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have felt it. You couldn't have known, Emma said, her voice firm despite its weakness. But that doctor, the older woman, she knew. She listened. Dr. Sullivan visited later that day, and Emma thanked her with tears streaming down her face. You saved my life. They were going to let me die, and you saved me. You saved your own life, Dr. Sullivan said firmly, pulling a chair close to Emma's bedside. You fought. I just made sure people were paying attention to the fight. Your brain was screaming that you were still there. I just had to listen closely enough to hear it. How did you know? Emma asked. How did you know to look deeper? Dr. Sullivan was quiet for a moment. 20 years ago, my sister was in a car accident. The doctor said she was in a vegetative state, that there was no hope. My family was ready to let her go. But I was in medical school then, studying neurology, and something didn't feel right. I pushed for more tests, and we discovered she was conscious, just unable to respond. She eventually recovered, not completely, but enough to live a meaningful life. She's married now, has 2 kids, works as a teacher. If we'd given up on her, none of that would have happened. Emma reached out with a shaking hand, and Dr. Sullivan took it. Thank you, Emma whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. The road to recovery was long and grueling. Emma spent 2 months in the intensive care unit, then was transferred to a rehabilitation facility. She had to relearn basic skills: how to sit up without assistance, how to stand, how to walk. Her muscles had atrophied during the coma, and every movement was exhausting. There were setbacks and frustrations, days when Emma cried from exhaustion and pain, days when she wanted to give up. Her cognitive functions were intact. The sharp mind that had made her such an effective social worker was still there. But her body felt like a stranger's, refusing to obey her commands. I ran a marathon last year, she said one day, tears of frustration streaming down her face as she struggled to walk 10 feet with a walker. And now I can't even make it across the room. You will, Marcus said, walking beside her, ready to catch her if she fell. You fought your way out of a coma, Em. You can do this too. The physical therapists were relentless, but encouraging. They pushed Emma to her limits every day, celebrating small victories. The first time she stood unassisted, the first time she walked without the walker, the first time she climbed a flight of stairs. Emma approached the rehabilitation with the same determination she'd brought to her marathons, setting goals and refusing to quit, even when every muscle screamed in protest. I didn't fight my way out of a coma to give up now, she'd say, when the therapist pushed her to do 1 more rep, walk 1 more lap, try 1 more time. Sarah visited constantly, bringing news from the outside world, gossip from their friend group, updates on the social work cases Emma had been handling before the accident. Your kids miss you, Sarah told her. They ask about you all the time. Tyrone, you remember Tyrone, the kid who was about to age out of foster care? He got into college, full scholarship. He said it was because you believed in him when no one else did. Emma cried when she heard that, happy tears this time. I want to go back, she said. I want to get back to work. You will, Sarah assured her. But first you need to get better. Marcus had taken a leave of absence from his law firm, something that would have been unthinkable before the accident. His partners had been understanding, telling him to take all the time he needed, but Marcus knew there were limits to their patience. He didn't care. Emma was his priority, his only priority. He was there for every physical therapy session, every occupational therapy appointment, every small victory, and every setback. He learned how to help her with exercises at home, how to encourage her without pushing too hard, how to be patient when she was frustrated and angry. "I'm sorry," Emma said one evening after a particularly difficult day. She'd fallen during therapy, bruising her knee and her pride, and had been snapping at everyone since. "I'm sorry I'm such a mess." "You're not a mess," Marcus said firmly. "You're recovering from a traumatic brain injury. You're allowed to have bad days." "You didn't sign up for this," Emma said, her voice small. "You were supposed to marry a healthy, independent woman, not this." Marcus took her face in his hands, making her look at him. "I signed up for you, Emma. All of you. In sickness and in health, remember? I know we haven't said those vows yet, but I meant them the day I proposed. I love you. Not the version of you that could run marathons or work 60-hour weeks. You. The person you are, right now, fighting to get better. That's who I love." Emma kissed him then, a soft, sweet kiss that tasted of tears and hope. 6 months after the accident, Emma was discharged from rehab. She still used a cane and tired easily, but she was herself again, laughing, planning, living. Marcus had moved their wedding date back, not wanting to rush. But Emma surprised him one evening as they sat in their apartment, Pumpkin purring on her lap. "I want to get married," she said suddenly. "Soon. I don't want to wait anymore." Marcus looked up from the legal brief he'd been reviewing. "Are you sure? We can take our time. Make sure you're fully recovered." Emma shook her head. "I spent 3 weeks trapped in my own body, unable to tell you I loved you, unable to live. I don't want to waste any more time. Life's too short and too precious. I want to be your wife, Marcus. I want to start our life together, not keep waiting for the perfect moment." Marcus set aside his work and moved to sit beside her, careful not to disturb Pumpkin. "Okay," he said, taking her hand. "Let's get married." They were married 2 months later, in a small ceremony at the Boston Public Garden, under the same cherry trees where Marcus had proposed. It was April, and the blossoms were in full bloom, pink petals drifting down like snow. Emma walked down the aisle without her cane, determined to do it on her own strength. Her father walked beside her, ready to catch her if she stumbled, but she made it all the way to where Marcus stood waiting, tears streaming down his face. Dr. Sullivan was there, seated in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Sarah was the maid of honor, and David was the best man. Emma's parents sat with Marcus's family, all of them crying happy tears this time. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When it came time for the vows, Marcus spoke first. "Emma, 3 months ago, I was planning your funeral," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was choosing caskets and burial plots, convinced I'd lost you forever. But you are the strongest person I know, and you refused to leave me. You fought your way back from the edge of death, and you've shown me what real courage looks like." He paused, wiping his eyes. "You taught me that hope isn't foolish, that miracles do happen, and that love really can conquer anything. I promise to never give up on us, on you, for as long as I live. I promise to be there for every step of your recovery, every challenge, every victory. I promise to love you in sickness and in health, in good times and bad, for all the days of my life." Emma was crying openly now, and when it was her turn to speak, her voice shook but remained strong. "Marcus, when I was in the coma, I could hear pieces of what was happening around me. I heard you talking to me, telling me you loved me, begging me to come back. Your voice was like a lifeline, pulling me back from the darkness. Even when I couldn't respond, couldn't show you I was there, I held on to the sound of your voice." She squeezed his hands. "You didn't give up on me, even when everyone said you should. You fought for me, and that gave me the strength to fight for myself. I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you how grateful I am, how much I love you." I promise to be your partner, your best friend, your wife, through whatever challenges life throws at us. We've already survived the worst. Everything else will be easy." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed Emma to applause and cheers. The reception was held at a nearby restaurant, intimate and joyful, filled with the people who'd supported them through the darkest time of their lives. During the reception, Marcus gave a toast that had everyone crying again. "3 months ago, I was planning Emma's funeral," he said, raising his glass. "I was choosing caskets and burial plots, convinced I'd lost her forever. But Emma is the strongest person I know, and she refused to leave me. With the help of an incredible doctor who saw what others missed, she fought her way back from the edge of death." He turned to Emma, who was wiping tears from her cheeks. "You taught me that hope isn't foolish, that miracles do happen, and that love really can conquer anything. I promise to never give up on us, on you, for as long as I live." Emma stood, steadier now, and took the microphone. Her voice was clear and strong as she addressed the room. "I want to say something to anyone who might hear this story," she said. "If you have a loved one in a coma, don't give up. Get second opinions, third opinions, as many as it takes. The brain is mysterious, and consciousness is more complex than we understand. I was there, trapped and aware, and if Marcus had given up 1 week earlier, I wouldn't be standing here today." She looked at Dr. Sullivan, who was smiling through her tears. "And to the medical professionals, thank you for seeing patients as people, not just charts and scans. Dr. Sullivan, you looked deeper, you asked questions, you refused to accept the easy answer. You gave me my life back, and I will never be able to thank you enough." The celebration continued late into the evening, filled with laughter and music and joy. As Marcus and Emma danced their first dance as husband and wife, he held her close, marveling at the miracle of her heartbeat against his chest, her breath warm on his neck, her body solid and real in his arms. "What are you thinking?" Emma asked, looking up at him. "I'm thinking about how close I came to losing you," Marcus admitted. "How I was planning your burial while you were fighting to wake up. It terrifies me." Emma squeezed his hand, that same squeeze that had been the first sign of her emergence, that had changed everything. "But you didn't lose me. I'm here. We are here. That's what matters." "I love you," Marcus said, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd been through, everything they'd almost lost. "I love you too," Emma replied, "and I'm never leaving you. I fought death itself to get back to you. Nothing's going to separate us now." As they swayed to the music, surrounded by friends and family who'd supported them through the darkest time of their lives, Marcus felt a profound gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for Dr. Sullivan's expertise and intuition, for the technology that had revealed Emma's hidden consciousness, for the strength Emma had shown in fighting her way back. But mostly, he was grateful for the lesson he'd learned. That hope, even when it seems foolish, is always worth holding on to. That the human spirit is more resilient than we can imagine. And that sometimes, the difference between tragedy and miracle is simply refusing to give up, even when everything seems lost. The months that followed were filled with continued recovery and adjustment. Emma returned to work part-time, easing back into her caseload with the at-risk youth she'd missed so much. Her supervisor had been understanding, allowing her to work from home when she was too tired to come into the office, adjusting her schedule to accommodate physical therapy appointments. The kids Emma worked with were overjoyed to have her back. Tyrone, the young man who'd gotten the college scholarship, came to visit her at the office, bringing flowers and a card signed by all the kids in the program. "You came back?" he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We heard you were in an accident, that you might not make it, but you came back." "I had to," Emma said, hugging him tightly. "I couldn't leave you guys. You're too important to me." Emma and Marcus settled into a new normal. Emma couldn't run marathons anymore. Her doctor said maybe someday, but not yet. But she started walking, building up her stamina slowly. Marcus would walk with her in the evenings, the two of them strolling through their neighborhood, talking about their days, making plans for the future. They talked about having children someday, though Emma's doctors wanted her to wait at least a year to make sure her recovery was complete. They talked about buying a house, maybe something with a yard for Pumpkin and the dog they wanted to adopt. They talked about growing old together, about all the years they'd almost lost. A year after the accident, Emma and Marcus visited Massachusetts General Hospital, bringing flowers and thank you cards for the nurses who'd cared for Emma. They met with Dr. Sullivan, who'd become a friend as well as Emma's doctor. "I'm starting a foundation," Emma told her, "to raise awareness about consciousness in coma patients, to fund research into better diagnostic tools. I want to make sure other families get the same chance we got, that other patients get the comprehensive testing that saved my life." Dr. Sullivan's eyes filled with tears. "That's wonderful, Emma. I'd be honored to help in any way I can." The foundation, called Awakening Hope, launched 6 months later. Emma and Marcus became advocates, speaking at medical conferences, sharing their story with families facing similar decisions, pushing for better protocols in assessing consciousness in coma patients. They worked with Dr. Sullivan to develop guidelines for when PET scans should be ordered, for how long families should wait before considering withdrawal of care, for the importance of aggressive stimulation therapy. The foundation funded research into consciousness, into new technologies that could detect awareness in patients who appeared unresponsive. Emma also started a support group for coma survivors and their families. She knew firsthand how isolating the experience could be, how difficult the recovery was, how much people needed to connect with others who understood. The group met monthly, and Emma was always there, sharing her story, offering hope, listening to others share their struggles and victories. "You give people hope," Marcus told her one evening as they prepared for a support group meeting. "You show them that recovery is possible." "I am hope," Emma said simply. "I'm living proof that miracles happen, that consciousness is more complex than we understand, that love and determination can overcome incredible odds. If my story can help even one family make a different decision, if it can save even one life, then everything I went through was worth it." 2 years after the accident, Emma ran her first 5K since the coma. It wasn't a marathon, but it was a victory nonetheless. Marcus ran beside her the whole way, and when they crossed the finish line, Emma collapsed into his arms, crying and laughing at the same time. "I did it," she sobbed. "I actually did it." "You did," Marcus said, holding her tight. "I never doubted you would." They had their first child 3 years after the accident, a daughter they named Hope Margaret, after the hope that had sustained them and the doctor who'd saved Emma's life. Dr. Sullivan cried when they told her, honored beyond words. Emma's pregnancy had been carefully monitored, her doctors cautious given her medical history, but everything went smoothly. When Hope was born, healthy and perfect, Emma held her daughter and marveled at the miracle of life, at how close she'd come to never experiencing this moment. "I almost missed this," she whispered to Marcus, as they sat together in the hospital room, Hope sleeping peacefully in Emma's arms. "I almost missed all of it." "But you didn't," Marcus said, kissing her forehead. "You're here. We're here. Our family is here." As Hope grew, Emma would tell her the story of how she'd fought her way back from the edge of death, how her father had refused to give up, how a wise doctor had looked deeper and seen the truth. Hope would listen with wide eyes, understanding even as a small child that her mother was special, that her family had been given a gift. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Marcus took Emma back to the Boston Public Garden, to the spot under the cherry trees where he'd proposed and where they'd later married. The blossoms were in full bloom, pink petals drifting down like snow, just like on their wedding day. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Dr. Sullivan hadn't ordered that PET scan?" Emma asked, leaning against him. watching Hope chase the petals. "Every day," Marcus admitted. "I think about how close we came to missing this, all of this, our marriage, our daughter, our life together. It haunts me sometimes. How close I came to making the wrong decision." "Don't let it haunt you," Emma said firmly, turning to face him. "You did the best you could with the information you had. And when you got new information, you changed course. That takes courage too." "I almost gave up on you," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "But you didn't," Emma said, taking his face in her hands. "When it mattered most, when Dr. Sullivan offered hope, you took it. You postponed the funeral. You gave me a chance. That's what I remember, Marcus. Not that you considered letting go, but that you held on." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, watching their daughter play, grateful beyond words for the life they'd been given. Emma thought about the darkness she'd been trapped in, the desperate fight to show she was still there, the moment when she'd finally been able to squeeze Marcus's hand and show him she was alive. She thought about Dr. Sullivan, about the PET scan that had revealed her consciousness, about the steroids that had reduced the swelling and allowed her to emerge. She thought about the long months of rehabilitation, the frustration and pain and determination. She thought about all the small victories that had led to this moment. Standing in the spring sunshine with her husband and daughter, alive and whole and happy. "We should go," Marcus said eventually. "Hope's getting tired." As they walked home through the Boston streets, Hope riding on Marcus's shoulders, Emma reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the depths of despair in that hospital room, from Marcus planning a funeral for the woman he loved, to this moment of perfect contentment, walking together as a family in the spring evening. Life had taught them that strength isn't about always having the answers or always making the right decisions. Sometimes strength is admitting you don't know, asking for help, being willing to hope even when hope seems irrational. Emma had been strong enough to fight her way back from the edge of death. Dr. Sullivan had been strong enough to question the accepted diagnosis and look deeper. And Marcus had been strong enough, in the end, to hold on to hope for just a little bit longer. That hope had made all the difference. It had been the thin thread that kept Emma tethered to life, that gave Dr. Sullivan the time she needed to uncover the truth, that allowed a miracle to unfold. Years passed, and the Richardson-Webb family grew. They had a son 2 years after Hope, naming him Robert David, after Emma's father and Marcus's best friend. Emma's career flourished. She became the director of her social work program, implementing new approaches to helping at-risk youth that became models for other cities. Marcus made partner at his firm and specialized in medical advocacy cases, using his experience with Emma to help other families navigate complex medical decisions. The Awakening Hope Foundation grew beyond their wildest dreams. They funded research that led to new diagnostic tools for assessing consciousness in coma patients. They trained doctors in comprehensive evaluation protocols. They provided support and resources to families facing impossible decisions. And they saved lives, dozens of them. Patients who would have been allowed to die but who were given a chance because of the awareness Emma and Marcus had raised. Every year on the anniversary of the day, Emma first squeezed Marcus's hand. They would visit Dr. Sullivan. She'd retired from active practice but remained involved with the foundation, mentoring young neurologists, teaching them to look deeper, to question assumptions, to see patients as people rather than collections of symptoms. "You changed the world," Emma told her on one of these visits. "Not just my world, but the world for so many families, so many patients." "We changed it together," Dr. Sullivan said. "Your courage, Marcus's love, and yes, my stubbornness about getting the right tests. It took all of us." On Emma's 38th birthday, 10 years after the accident, the family gathered at the public garden for a picnic. Hope was 7 now, Robert was 5, and Emma was pregnant with their 3rd child. Marcus watched his wife laugh with their children, marveling at how far they'd come, how much they'd overcome. "What are you thinking about?" Emma asked, catching him staring. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am," Marcus said. "How close I came to losing all of this, and how grateful I am that I didn't." Emma moved to sit beside him, her hand finding his automatically. "Do you remember what you said to me right before I squeezed your hand that first time?" Marcus thought back. "I was telling you about a custody case, about how you'd know what to say to the parents. You said you wished I could tell you what I thought," Emma said. "And I wanted so desperately to respond, to show you I was there. I focused every bit of energy I had on my hand, on trying to move it. And finally, I felt my fingers move. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I did it because I couldn't let you think I was gone." "You saved yourself," Marcus said, pulling her close. "We saved each other," Emma corrected. "You didn't give up on me, so I didn't give up on myself." As the sun set over Boston, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the Richardson-Webb family packed up their picnic and headed home. Hope and Robert ran ahead, their laughter echoing through the park, while Emma and Marcus walked hand in hand behind them. They passed the spot where Marcus had proposed, where they'd been married, where they'd celebrated so many milestones. It had become a sacred place for them, a reminder of where their journey had begun and how far they'd come. "I love you," Marcus said, the words as meaningful now as they'd been 10 years ago, when he'd whispered them to Emma's unconscious form. "I love you too," Emma replied. "Always and forever." And as they walked home through the streets of Boston, surrounded by the life they'd built together, the family they'd created, the love they'd fought so hard to preserve, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them here. From the darkness of the coma to the light of this perfect evening, from despair to hope, from death's door to abundant life. She'd been in a coma, unresponsive and seemingly beyond reach. Her alpha mate, the strong, decisive man who everyone looked to for answers, had planned her burial, convinced he'd lost her forever. But a healer, a doctor who looked deeper and listened harder, had whispered the words that changed everything. She has awakened. And in awakening, Emma had taught everyone around her the most important lesson of all, that consciousness, love, and the will to live are forces more powerful than any medical prognosis. That the human brain holds mysteries we're only beginning to understand, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply refusing to let go, even when the whole world tells you it's time. Emma had awakened, and in doing so, she had awakened hope in countless others. She had shown that miracles do happen, that recovery is possible, that love really can conquer all. Her story had rippled outward, touching lives she would never know, saving patients she would never meet, giving hope to families she would never speak to. She had awakened, and the world was brighter for it.